You're listening to Marketing with Vani, in which I speak to marketing gurus. Together, we decode how marketing works in the real world to grow your business. Way back in the early 90s, the cola market share was split between Coke and Thumbs Up. Pepsi had entered India just about then. And 1996 was a watershed year in the battle between Coke and Pepsi for dominant market share. Coke had won the title sponsorship for the World Cup for an estimated 10 crores, which was a staggering amount then. Pepsi used challenger marketing to turn the tables on Coke with much smaller spends and a very clever, hardworking campaign that mocked Coke with the tagline, "Nothing official about it, aha." Pepsi happened to adopt challenger marketing then because the situation compelled them to do so. Today, in the infinite clutter in almost every category, no player, including market leaders, have the luxury of not thinking like challengers. Listen to my first speaker on this subject, Bobby Pawar, Chairman Havas, on why even staying on the top needs a challenger mindset. In today's context, where there is so much clutter, would it be fair to say that almost every brand, barring perhaps a dominant market leader in the category, doesn't have a choice but to think like a challenger? How do I get the consumer's attention? If I were just a toothbrush, if I were just another soap, if I were just another coffee, if I were just another mobile phone, there's almost no category that one can think of which is not so heavily crowded. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm stepping into that category today. I don't have a choice but to not think like a challenger. Would you think that
Oh,
would be a fair statement to make?
absolutely, absolutely. You know what? At the top, there's only room for one, right? The rest is
Correct.
challengers. Till somebody knocks the person off the top of the podium, you are competing for that spot. So you need to play accordingly. The thing is, now, how do you decide what kind of challenger do you want to be? If you're like seventh, eighth brand in this thing, then maybe you want to be a rebel, right? You have to decide what type of challenger you want to be. Also, even sometimes, right? I'll tell you, there are brands, they're leaders, right? And they stay on top by challenging themselves.
Very nice.
Okay.
How
Now, if
lovely.
you take a look at Gillette, they do something, and in the very next thing they do, they challenge that, right? They launch a razor with 3 blades. Then next, there's 5 blades, one at the back, so you can reach the heart to each areas where your mustache grows. I think the challenger mindset is has to be embraced by everybody.
In order to think like a challenger, what all does one think about? I know, for example, I'm yet another soap brand or I'm yet another beauty care. I was looking at all the beauty skincare brands on Instagram. It's impossible to make out what brand stands for what. They all seem to have the same kind of influencer videos, the same kind of range, the same kind of packaging. It's even difficult to remember their brand names. Now I'm thinking, if I were another beauty care brand and I'm also born on Instagram, what am I going to do to get people to suddenly notice me? Why are people going to look at me versus anyone else? What all can I think of? On what aspect, what dimensions of the category can I challenge?
I think let's take for example. I think it's called Tom's shoes. See, a lot of times. Let's talk about existing leaders. Now the thing is, they have a large department within the this thing in the marketing department or in product development and all of that, which is all about evolution. I think they need to have like the really good ones. They have another core team, right? Smaller, nimbler, this thing, and a hell of a lot braver. They are the revolution gang. And these are the people who shake things up. These are the people who propose scary things. But then at the top, there is leadership that says, hey, that's something we need to try. The one thing is that the one luxury you have as a leader is that you can afford to fail many more times. You know, you can do side experiments. See, I mean, take a look at Apple, right? What's one of the recently the bravest thing they've done? It's cost them revenue, all right? They said, okay, we are not going to let apps or websites track you without your permission. See, right now the permission is based on opt out. Almost this thing. You have to opt out to not be tracked. They've turned that on its head and said, if you opt in, they ask you, do you want to be tracked or not? If you say no, then they won't track you. Now, Safari, every time you reopen it on a Mac, we've stopped 164 sites from tracking you. I'm sure they could have monetized the tracking, right? But again, that's a revolutionary idea. And they just did it before anybody else did because they know that later people are going to be very, very concerned about their privacy. And in terms of communication, if you're yet another brand on Instagram, I think your innovation either needs to come from what is it? For example, Tom's Shoes was all about the sustainability, right? And that's a different narrative. Recycle everything.
Next on this episode, I have Lloyd Mathias. He spent over a decade with Pepsi and is now a mentor and advisor to several young startups. He gives several interesting examples of challenger brands and also talks about how the challenger mindset could actually play out in the market. Lloyd, over here, the simple question is, what is a challenger brand?
I would say a challenger brand is a brand that sees itself very different from the leader. I know of challenger brands that have effectively become leaders in their category, but still refuse to behave as one, which means they're always kind of taking pot shots at another brand or
Can
whatever.
you give some example? Any brand that you're very fond of that has brazenly taken pot shots at the market leader?
Slightly sensitive subject. I know how difficult it is to kind of get into this political battle, but to my mind, in a sense, sometimes the BJP, the party, it behaves like a challenger brand, right? For the last 7 to 10 years, they're pretty much the mainstream political party in India by far. But the way they take after some of their competitors, the Congress in particular, is the classic challenger brand DNA,
You're
right?
saying what you're doing of late?
I would say of the last 5 years, they always keep going after a competitor who's now reduced to a much more irrelevant in the larger context as a challenger brand. So I think that therefore the challenger brand DNA to my mind is always about not behaving like a leader, always behaving like you're the one who's a smaller player, and then trying to outsmart the leader. So in that sense, it's not necessarily a function of your market position. Though initially challenger brands typically tended to be number 2 and 3, and they got their attention by taking pot shots to the leader, I think that's not necessarily the case. Having said which, I think of late, if I were to look at one interesting challenger brand proposition in the last 1 year, I'd give it to the German brand of Sebamed. I think what they did by turning the whole conversation on the pH value of soap, they suddenly made that relevant to a whole segment of Indians, right? It might well be the, let's say a top 5% or top 2% of the market, but it forced everyone to re-examine their positions, including the market leaders. So therefore, I think a great challenger brand is able to make the entire market look at its proposition differently and then even make the leader want to react.
Very, very nice. I think Sebamed is an excellent example. And what I really, really liked you said was that a challenger brand does not mean it's necessarily a function of the market position. It's not as though a small brand necessarily needs to think like a challenger. So even a large brand and perhaps even the market leader may have to think like a challenger depending on the situation it's in.
Absolutely, Vani. In fact, as most of us grown up into the Pepsi and the Coke and the Avis and the car rental wars, I think we've learned to believe that it's necessarily the smaller brand that is to behave one. I think over time you realize that smart brands can take the challenge approach while even staying at number one.
So, yes, you're absolutely right. For example, even to break the hegemony of the smaller players, for example, in the world of snacks, there is a little king in every 30 square kilometers. And here is Pepsi, the national player, which is trying to make inroads into towns and villages with big brands like a Lay's and Kurkure. And even to do this, we don't have a choice but to think like a challenger in many respects. And I think ITC, for example, has done that very well in some respects. These are all brands which are actually national brands that have broken into smaller territories because of the challenger thinking, so to speak, that they applied in the world of trade marketing. or the way they fashioned their schemes or what they did to win the wholesale market.
Absolutely. I think you made a great point there, Vani, because I think, therefore, one aspect of Challenger is to sharply define your geography, right? So, in the media world, for a long time, the Times of India was pretty much market leader in Bombay by far. In Delhi, let's say they had a close competitor in Hindustan Times. But when the Times of India relaunched in Bangalore in the 90s, they recognized that Deccan Herald was the market leader by far. And therefore, all that they did was to kind of play the bad boy. We'll do more, we'll price less, we'll give you special offers, we'll have daily contests. So they made it difficult. They made the marketer reevaluate their position until such time as they gained enough traction and currency to, let's say, to oust the market leader. They are pretty much in the similar path in Chennai, where Hindu has been established for about 100 years. So therefore, the ability to define your geography and say, I might be market leader at a national level, but hey, in this market, I've got to play the game as a local. I think that's one critical element. So one is to redefine your geography, not take your national position for granted. You might still be number one, but you can still play the kind of rough and naughty game. And for a lot of consumers, that's what they like. The whole intensity that comes with being a challenger, the fact that you're willing to try out new things. I think it gives consumers a bit of a more human personality.
Coming up, Subhash Kamath, the man with the world's longest designation, which I will not attempt, but he's CEO Publicis and Chairman ASCII. How do challenger brands rope in consumers when the market leader is creating the codes of the category? Listen on. At most times, actually, you may not find anything different in the product at all.
Correct. So therefore, then the differentiation needs to come from the brand side of it, the more intangible side of it. Correct. If three people are going to tell me the same thing, I'll go with the one who speaks my language, which means that as a brand, I need to find that conversation with my consumer, which is differentiated. Now, that can come from anywhere. That can come from a societal truth. It can come from a human truth. It can come from a cultural truth. It can come from how the consumer is thinking. It can come from a life stage of the consumer. For example, a young mother who's just become a mother with her first baby can have a very different mindset than what she was 6 months ago. So you have to interrogate the truth and which truth will work out best. We have something called the circles of truth, and you examine not just from a category perspective or the product perspective, but from a cultural perspective, from societal perspective, from economic perspective, from everything. You look around the world that the consumer lives in and find an emotional insight or a value that can help you differentiate your brand. Exactly what Pepsi did with Coke, right? Coke was a more inclusive brand. This is my world, come and enjoy it, right? Open happiness, for example. Coke has always been a very inclusive brand for everyone and a very powerful brand. Now, Pepsi was a challenger. If you try as a challenger brand, the worst thing you can do is to try and copy the leader, because whatever you do will go for the leader's benefit. Okay? Don't try and belong to his world. He is a leader because he has created a powerful world. Correct? Don't try and belong to that. Create your own hill, which is equally powerful, and then draw the kind of people who will be interested in you. So Coke was for everyone. Pepsi said, I'm only for youngsters. They created a parallel hill. Or you can just create a parallel space which resonates with the consumers that you're talking to. Like I told you, when everybody was chasing success, we focused on personal progress. And that differentiated us. So similarly, even on Axe, if you see the most successful work of Axe, it was not about, there's a beautiful thing about Axe, which I think a lot of people have not realized. The Axe effect is not, how does one put it? It's a backhanded look at seduction. If you understand what I mean. There are lots of brands today who are trying to imitate Axe, but actually failing because they just spray it on themselves and this woman comes to them, right? Now, in Axe, if you see, it was always done in a slightly unbelievable way. In real life, a nerdy looking guy like that will never ever get that gorgeous woman. So you don't take it too seriously. You don't take that message literally. You laugh along the joke. You laugh along with the wit and you smile along, and that's how you like the brand. So it's a backhanded look at seduction, which a lot of the people who copied it didn't realize.
And a lot of the competitors did exactly that. They went down the seduction route and failed for exactly this reason.
They went down the sexual attraction route. That's not what Axe is about. Axe was about actually being a bit tongue-in-cheek about the fact that this brand will actually get you the most gorgeous girl. It doesn't, and nobody believes it. So the day you lose that backhanded gene of communication in Axe, then you screw it up. So that's what I mean when you want to differentiate. It needs a lot of maturity. It needs a lot of craft and thinking. And therefore, just getting another celebrity is not going to differentiate your brand. Your brand needs to first differentiate itself. What is the value that you stand for? That's got to be admirable and looked up to by your consumers. That's when you'll be able to differentiate. I'm saying that you firstly create your own hill. Don't try and follow the leader. You'll be seen as a follower.
And finally, I'm speaking with Shankar Prasad, founder Plum, a vegan PETA certified skincare brand. Today, however, if you were to open Instagram and see, almost every beauty brand claims to be vegan. So, what does it take to keep growing? How does he keep the brand differentiated? Does he worry about being one in more than 3,000 skincare brands in India today? Imagine if you were to launch a skincare brand, one more in the estimated 40 billion USD category, what would you do? Hear it from someone who's raising tons of money even at the height of COVID, has aggressive expansion plans, and is definitely one of the prettiest poster boys of challenger marketing. So, my first question to you, Shankar, is that you today have a very successful skincare brand. I see you splashed across magazine covers. You're covered very heavily in all of the news in the context of D2C. So you have made a great success of this brand today. But when you started out, did you not ever feel riddled with fear and anxiety? Did you not ever feel, oh gosh, this is already such a heavily cluttered market? There are big players with very deep pockets, and I'm attempting to build yet another skincare brand. Did you not ever feel this sense of, oh gosh, what am I setting out to do? Am I doing the right thing?
Yeah, okay. So just to put it in perspective, I think while you're being generous by saying we have gotten there, I still think we are quite a distance from getting there, whatever that there means. I consider ourselves very WIP. Although we've sort of established some kind of a base, is how I would put it, but we're far from sort of climbing the peak. We're very, very far from it. Having said that, if I sort of rewind to 2013 when I was thinking about getting in, of course, it's daunting to see the market even now. In fact, there's a lot more competition in the internet space than there ever was during that time. Most of the competition during that time was the traditional players. Now it's a way more vibrant, way more sort of, in a way, even crowded market that we operate in. But I think 2 or 3 things I've fundamentally believed in, which is what gives me the fuel every day. Number one is this concept of customer delight. It's a sort of oft-repeated cliche. It's like almost table stakes. One can say you can't be in business unless you delight the customer. But I think it goes a little deeper than that. It's a little tougher than simply saying, yeah, sure, I make good products and I market reasonably well and my orders reach them in 24 hours and whatever. It's an everyday task to keep in touch with how your consumer is feeling or thinking, what choices do they have, what needs do they have, and continuing to address that. I think if we do that, you don't really have to be worried about competition. And in that sense, the market is a true leveler. You can be the smallest of brands and scale in no time. You can be the largest of brands and be brought to ground in no time if you are not in touch with what the consumer wants. And it's equally true for everybody, whether it's a startup who's starting today, or it's somebody like us who's been at it for a while, or a brand which has been at it for decades. It's true.
So don't lose sight of the consumer is the first thing that you're saying.
It's really about the consumer.
Perfect. And you started out by saying 2 things. What is the second thing?
The second thing is that the market is never a winner takes all market in beauty. You look at any beauty shelf of any consumer today, I can bet that the average number of brands that are residing in that shelf and are being used actively is upwards of 4 or 5. across makeup, across skincare, across hair care, body care, other forms of personal care. Easily 4 or 5. My sense is the number is closer to 7 or 10 in urban areas across. If you total up the sheer number of brands in any closet, that itself tells you that there is a lot of space to play. It's not like if she uses my, let's say, face wash, she's just going to say, I'm going to use only Plum all my life for all my requirements. So, therefore, there's a lot of opportunity to meet varied needs of people everywhere. And no one brand can afford to do that. Even if you look at the larger companies, they do follow a string of pearl strategy wherein they acquire brands. This you can see abroad, not so much in India yet, but you can see a lot of this going on abroad. The sheer sort of variety of emotions and physical needs that the beauty industry caters to, I don't think one brand can ever hope to do it. And therefore, by its very nature, the market is going to be a long tail market. And that is good news for people who are starting out.
Fabulous, fabulous. This is really, really helpful. So, what you're saying is that there is definitely, this is one category where there is definitely repertoire play.
Yeah.
And if you have some understanding of the consumer, because it is a long tail market, there is certainly room for everyone. Everyone decent, of course. You cannot have a decent product and hope to put on her dressing table, but you're
Right.
half decent, then you can. Oh, okay, fantastic. This is really good. And the other thing, tell me, even while you spoke of customer delight, what was it? Whether it was, I'm not saying that you should reveal the secret sauce of your
Yeah.
formulation, but what was it that you felt absolutely confident about? That you felt, I can still get some small decimal percentage of that market. And with that confidence, let me jump in.
So I did not have that confidence when I jumped in. I, of course, thought I could, but I didn't know for sure I could. And therefore, I think the initial part when I was doing the beta phase of the products and the beta turned out to be the alpha and I didn't have to do too much of beta. I think getting the right mix of the emotional side right and the practical side right in terms of the product and the brand, and a lot of it sort of clicking into place, what I call the combination lock falling into place. It's product plus packaging plus design plus social media plus another number of things that make the whole thing fall in place in people's minds. I worked hard on getting our combination lock right, not a universal combination lock. Every brand has their
Correct.
combination numbers, combination series. So I worked hard on getting our combination series right, and we continue to work hard at making sure that our combination series is the one that is unlocking into people's minds. And that has to change over time. I can't have a static number. That's the beauty of it. What was relevant 8 years ago and what was new 8 years ago is table stakes now. What is new today is probably going to be table stakes 3 years from now or 4 years from now. And what we thought would be like raging trend 2 years back fell flat. You have to all the time keep pace with what's going on in people's mind, what people are reacting to, what people don't care about, or what people care about. And that's across brand, across product, across formulation, format, pricing, whatever, across all these elements of the marketing mix. It's a continuous job of keeping pace or actually staying ahead of the pace.
Very interesting. So, do you actually do a lot of social media listening? Is there some concerted way by which you actually are able to make sense of all the social media commentary, even if it's around your own brand only?
So we have 2 or 3 ways of doing this. One is, of course, social media, and one is a brute force way of doing it. We are just at it all the time. I think the group stops buzzing for I think exactly 5 hours in the night, or maybe 4 hours between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. Otherwise, somebody or the other is at it in terms of what they see, what they listen, what people are saying about our brand, other brands, what other brands are talking about. So there's a lot of exchange, there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of action going on. It's always on, and sometimes I have to stop myself to not message the group at like 1 a.m. or 6 a.m. or something because it's always on. The other way of listening is through our own customer support and customer experience team that we have. Very dedicated bunch of people who truly live the value of customer delight. So we have, in addition to wherever there's an escalation, of course, it comes to me. But even if there are no escalation, if there's a sort of series of things that we are seeing and there's a pattern that's emerging, we have a weekly call with all the brand managers, with the channel heads, with the supply chain, with quality, with formulation guys getting in on one call where they just table a list of issues that have happened in the last 1 week. And that's mostly problem solution rather than ideation, but sometimes ideation also happens. People are asking a lot for this product or for this pack size or for this combination. Can I combine this product with this product and make a combo out of it? So those ideas happen also at this sort of formal call where the heroes in the call are really the customer support team. We are listening, we are not talking. That's the second. The third one that we have is a in-house sort of insight gathering team who use all whatever comes to their mind. They speak to customer, they speak to beauty advisors in the field, they speak to existing customer, they speak to lapsers. So they have something or the other that's on their mind. That's some questions that we need answered, and that's on also on a regular basis. Besides now what I spoke in the very beginning about external help that we are getting for insight gathering, that's something that just started. We were not very heavy on external sort of market research, but now we're doing that also quite a bit.
Fabulous. That's very, very comprehensive. So I want to ask you, Shankar, the fact that you are as consumer oriented also tells me that you're very, very keen to make sense of the category and in some ways in your own way also looking to stand out from the category.
We are a challenger brand and I think we always will be. For the simple reason, two reasons again I'll give you. One is a favorite quote, and it's actually Amazon credo almost of it's always day one. That's a beautiful philosophy to operate with, that you never think that you are an organization. Amazon thinks it's day one every day, right? Being the largest retailer on the planet by a mile. If Amazon can think it's day one, I think for a company like us, it's day one forever. So that's one philosophy with which to operate. The second thing about being a challenger brand is because the market is changing so rapidly and sometimes unpredictably, you're almost always a challenger. Every brand is a challenger because the space you're occupying may no longer be relevant. You're going to be having to move into some other sort of space. To give you an example, EcoCert certified organic cosmetics used to be hot, relatively hotter about 5-6 years ago. Today, it is the ingredient-driven, active-driven sort of space which is hotter, right? A brand that was we were EcoCert certified organic on one or two of our products when I started out, and that's the sort of territory from which we are approaching this space. Now, a brand like us can't say, this is where I remain where I am, because people are sort of expressing a higher preference for ingredient-driven chemistry. That's where we will go, but without giving up our ethos that we started out with. We can't be morphing infinitely every time the market preferences are changing, but somewhere you have to reorient yourself almost fluidly. And the challenging part in all this is that the pace of this change is very high. So the sweep that you're seeing in the market of ingredient-driven, active-driven products, I suspect is less than 18 months old or less than 24 months old. And in 24 months, it has come to almost take over the sort of top slot in the market. That never used to happen before. It used to take years for trends to, first of all, happen in the West and years for it to trickle down into India and years for people to adopt it. So what was a glacial pace market is now suddenly like Uber.
If the consumer is moving as fast, then for a manufacturer to keep up or for a brand to keep up, then the brand must have a lot of agility and flexibility, even in terms of what it puts out to the consumer, which means it will have implications at the back end in ops, in manufacturing agility.
That is where the challenger mindset is important. You have to always think of yourself as a challenger brand. If you think I'm a defender brand, then that means that you are not going to be as agile on all the things that you spoke about. A challenger basically is not afraid of bringing everything down and setting something new up. And to do that at scale and at pace, that's really challenging.
Absolutely.
I hope you liked my show. And if you did, please do consider subscribing. I also have a YouTube channel by the same name, Marketing by Vani. Please do check that out too. Thank you.
How badly could you screw up one line? Okay. So I did screw up. My YouTube channel is called Marketing with Vani, the same name as this podcast.